The Galactic Council was never built to handle defiance. It was forged in the aftermath of endless wars, sewn together by fragile peace, and held aloft by the illusion of unity. The moment humans walked in, that illusion began to crack. Not because humans threatened them with war, but because they didn't beg. They never bowed, never asked for approval. They merely observed, then offered cooperation like equals. That unsettled everyone more than any fleet ever could. When the Terran delegation first arrived, they were late. Not by incompetence, but by indifference. The Council had expected reverence, diplomatic groveling, at least an apology. Instead, the humans strolled in wearing practical uniforms, no decorative robes, no house insignias, no ceremonial offerings. They weren't here to please anyone. They were here to see if the Council was worth their time. Councillor Zeltor of the Varn Dominion was the first to take offense. He tapped his golden claws against the ceremonial table, his voice smooth but condescending. Humans, you're new to this galaxy's political ecosystem. Perhaps a more humble tone would help you earn your place. The human, identified only as Ambassador Lane, didn't even flinch. We're not looking for a place. We're looking for partners. Or not. Either way, we're good. That was the first fracture. The council chambers were designed to intimidate. Vast halls carved from living crystal, overseen by ancient sentinels, lit with the compressed light of dying stars. But the humans didn't marvel. They studied, measured, calculated. The council interpreted this as arrogance. It wasn't. It was preparation. The humans weren't overwhelmed because they'd already been somewhere worse. Earth. They listened politely, endured the grandstanding, but when asked to sign the Accord of Obedience, an old, symbolic gesture meant to show respect for the hierarchy, the humans simply passed it back and signed. "You're refusing unity?" asked the council chair, a being so ancient that even memory had forgotten her origin. Lane shook his head. "We're refusing subservience. There's a difference." That was the second fracture. The council believed power was legacy. That authority came from age, from wars won centuries ago. But humans didn't care about old wars. They cared about present threats. They didn't worship empires. They audited them. While the council flaunted its fleets, the humans ran simulations. They quietly observed trade routes, communication protocols, vulnerabilities. Not because they planned to attack, but because that's what they did. They assessed risk. And what they saw horrified them. Corruption embedded like rot. Power games disguised as diplomacy. Entire species enslaved under terms like protective governance. The humans didn't argue. They just stopped returning calls. Diplomats were pulled. Agreements were paused. Trade halted. Humanity, politely but decisively, walked away. That was the third fracture. The council didn't react immediately. At first, they laughed. Let the primitives sulk. But then the silence grew. Human corporations disappeared from market. Military advisors withdrew from border conflict. Human relief vessels vanished from crisis zones. And soon, so did stability. Entire sectors began to unravel. Wars long held at bay by quiet human mediation reignited. Trade collapsed in systems where Terran logistics had kept chaos in check. Pirates, once hunted by human patrols, returned like locusts. And across dozens of worlds, people began asking the same question: where did the humans go? Still, the council refused to acknowledge the truth. They blamed insurgents, black markets, fringe cult. Anything but the obvious. Humanity had held more of the galaxy together than anyone had realized. Not through conquest, but competence. And then came the turning point. A plague hit the Marnak cluster. Fast, virulent, adaptive. It swept across 12 systems in days. The council deployed medical fleets, but they lacked the equipment, the personnel, the protocols. They called for help. Earth didn't answer. In desperation, they hacked into Terran archives, trying to steal a cure. What they found wasn't just a cure, but the entire Marnak genome sequenced, studied, and stored. Not for power, but because the humans had treated the Marnak decades ago, quietly, respectfully, off the record. They had already solved the problem. And they had done it without ever asking for recognition. Too late, the Council realized. Humanity hadn't needed the Council. The Council had needed humanity. When they finally reached out again, it wasn't with demands or decrees, but with a request. A plea. Would Earth return? They received a message. Short. Final. You had your chance. The chamber fell silent when the message played. No booming threats, no ultimatums. Just absence. Absolute and deliberate. The kind that crushes empires not with war, but with withdrawal. In the weeks that followed, reports trickled in from outer sectors. Human colonies were thriving, independent and fortified. Former allies were defecting to Earth-aligned network. Whole civilizations were migrating, desperate to reach human-governed space. Not because of military power, but because the humans cared. They had standards, accountability, justice. Not perfection, but effort. The Council began to panic. Delegates turned on each other. Accusations flew. Some demanded military action against human colonies, to force them back into the fold. Others laughed bitterly. You want to fight them? They haven't even tried yet. And we're already losing. Even their military intelligence admitted it. Earth had never shown its full hand. The human fleets that had once looked modest were now revealed to be forward deployments. Scouts. The real strength lay elsewhere. Stations hidden in dead systems, fleets anchored in black voids, strategies written by minds that refused to think like politicians. In the absence of humans, the galaxy learned just how reliant they'd become on sanity. On restraint. On someone quietly making sure that wars didn't get too big, that corruption didn't go too far, that destruction didn't tip the balance. Humanity hadn't imposed order. They'd offered it. When refused, they didn't retaliate. They just let nature take its course. And nature was cruel. Across the galaxy, monuments were toppled, temples abandoned. Empires fell, not by fire, but by entropy. Without the humans, everything slowed, broke, festered. The Council, once seen as divine custodians, were exposed as little more than bureaucrats in gilded robes. Meanwhile, Earth watched. Not gloating. Not angry. Just done. Some say they built a new council. Smaller, leaner, just. Others say they turned inward, focusing on building something better, something beyond the stars. But the truth remains. The day the humans walked away was the day the galaxy began to crumble. And still, no one really understood why. Why would a species capable of building order choose to let everything collapse? Because they'd tried. They'd offered solutions. Cooperation. Strength. The Council had demanded submission instead. And humanity doesn't kneel. They build. And if you push them away, they won't fight for a place in your crumbling palace. They'll build a better one. And lock the gates behind them. That was the final fracture. And this time, it wouldn't be repaired. The collapse wasn't loud. It was quiet. Insidious. Like the slow decay of a once great structure that everyone kept pretending was still stable. Without human involvement, the Galactic Council became what it had always threatened to be: ornamental. A ceremonial shell. No teeth. No will. Only protocol and politics left behind, and those don't hold back gravity. It started in the outer systems. Formerly stable planets under indirect Terran logistical support began to suffer failures. Freight routes jammed. Automated repair schedules were missed. Software patches never arrived. Minor inconveniences at first, but with cascading consequences. On Mevris Prime, waste systems failed, and within 3 weeks, an outbreak of virulent blue fever erupted. On Trinil Station, gravity dampeners went offline. 4,000 inhabitants floated helplessly for days before a private Terran contractor arrived, not to help, but to remove their hardware. Terms void. Agreements null. The message was consistent. Earth was done holding up a structure that refused to acknowledge its support beams. Inside the council chambers, dissent turned to paranoia. Delegates accused each other of secret Terran alignment. Old alliances fractured. Emergency sessions devolved into shouting matches. The Varn Dominion accused the Drell enclaves of trading illicitly with Earth. The Drell countered with leaked footage showing Varn ships trailing human convoys under the guise of diplomatic observation. The truth didn't matter. Only the perception of betrayal. Those who had once mocked the humans now found themselves competing for scraps of their technology. Entire black markets rose overnight, dedicated to smuggling human tools, code, and medicine into non-Terran space. The price of a Terran-standard environmental regulator reached levels comparable to military-grade weaponry. It wasn't power that Earth sold. It was stability. And that had become the rarest commodity in the galaxy. Not everyone remained silent. On the planet Xanther, a former council scientist named Dr. Cesari held a broadcast seen across 22 systems. In it, she explained the data. Quiet, methodical, unforgiving. Charts showed how disease levels had tripled where Terran oversight had ceased. Starvation rates doubled. Piracy increased fivefold. And her final words were not theory, but indictment. We didn't lose control. We gave it up. We dismissed humanity's methods because they weren't ancient, because they didn't come with ceremony. But they worked. And now they're gone. And now so are we. She vanished a week later. Officially, she retired. Unofficially, the council feared her message more than pirate. The vacuum grew. In the corporate sectors, Earth's withdrawal created a power void that others rushed to fill. The Kindari Syndicate, long suppressed by Terran interventional patrols, expanded aggressively. Within weeks, 5 trade hubs fell under their influence. The Council sent fleets to respond. Only 2 returned. One limping. One entirely silent. Surveillance showed a Syndicate flagship boasting a salvaged Terran targeting array, a weapon humans had once refused to sell. But now, with no treaties in place, it had been stolen. Repurposed. Used to decimate what remained of Council enforcement. The final illusion of power collapsed. The Council's fleets were outdated. Uncoordinated. Their command structures still relied on ceremonial rank. Humans had long warned them about it. About redundancy. About adaptability. No one had listened. Now no one could afford not to. Panic turned to desperation. Planets began declaring independence. Governors refused council orders. Some simply vanished from communication networks. Others tore down the council banners and raised their own. On Dethil 9, the planetary governor issued a broadcast declaring their world aligned with Terran standards, a term quickly adopted across 37 additional systems. It didn't mean Earth had returned. It meant others would pretend they had, hoping to attract the same result. The galaxy didn't miss humans for their weapons. It missed them for their rules. Earth never intervened. Not publicly. No fleets. No ultimatums. But on select occasions, unmarked ships were seen rescuing children from conflict zones, stabilizing planets on the brink of ecological ruin, delivering encrypted packages to collapsed government nodes. Always anonymously. Always precisely. They didn't come to be thanked. They came to prevent death. Not even the Council could deny what was happening. They convened an emergency summit, the first in over a century. It was less a meeting than a funeral for their relevance. The chair opened with a confession. She admitted that they had underestimated human resolve, that their culture wasn't built on conquest or dominance but obligation, and that they had walked away not in spite of their values, but because of them. The speech was short-lived. Half the chamber had already begun drafting messages to Earth before she finished speaking. But Earth wasn't accepting messages. Those who tried to enter Terran space were met with polite, but immovable, warnings. Humanity is not accepting diplomatic traffic at this time. Maintain distance. No further communication will be answered. Even fleets disguised as merchant convoys were turned away. No weapons fired. No aggression. Just walls. stronger than anything the Council had ever built. It wasn't isolation. It was filtration. The Council grew frantic. They authorized full transparency to Earth, offering access to archives, political control, even military co-command. Anything to restore the balance. The humans said nothing. On the fringe world of Tyran Reach, a minor admiral made a final desperate move. He launched a strike against a small Terran outpost near the border. The justification was vague, something about resources and sovereignty. The true goal was to force a response, to make Earth engage. It worked. The outpost's defense activated. Not weapons, not shields. A message, a recorded voice, cold and final. You knew what we were. You knew what we offered. You chose otherwise. Actions have consequences. Then, without a single Terran vessel visible, the attacking fleet lost all power. Communications, propulsion, targeting. Every system went dark. They drifted in orbit, helpless, for 11 days. No food. No water. Just silence. When Council recovery ships arrived, they found messages carved into the hulls. Not by weapons but by surgical precision. Coordinates, equations, map. Proof that humans could have destroyed them. But chose not to. Not yet. The message was clear. You are alive because we allow it. That shook the Council more than any direct assault could have. For the first time, they understood that humanity's restraint had been the only thing preventing their extinction. That the real war had never started because humans had already won it. Not through battle, but through being necessary. Humanity didn't need the Council. The Council needed them. And that imbalance could no longer be ignored. Quietly, former enemies of Earth began defecting. Former critics now begged for reconciliation. And in dark rooms, where strategy replaced pride, a new plan formed, not to control the humans but to earn their trust. Again. If such a thing was still possible. None of it mattered. Humanity remained silent. Meanwhile, the Terran frontier expanded, slowly, methodically, without fanfare. No declarations of empire, no conquest. Just precision. Worlds once considered too unstable were now thriving under quiet Terran re-engineering. Crops grew in barren soil. Machines healed ecosystems. Civil structures operated with no visible leadership, only an AI-optimized consensus model. The colonies were not hidden, but they were unreachable without invitation. No outsider could dock. No signal received a reply. What shocked the galaxy most was that humanity didn't rebuild old power structures. They didn't place humans above others. In fact, many colonies were led by non-human allies who had stayed during the withdrawal. Loyalty had been rewarded, not with gold or ships, but with a place at the foundation of something new. A council did exist in the Terran Zone, but it wasn't the Galactic Council. It was small, adaptive, rotating, with no permanent members, no elite dynasties. Every planet got one voice. Every dispute was algorithmically documented, judged by verified precedent, reviewed by a rotating panel of species with transparent conflict of interest checks. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. That was the difference. The humans had learned from their mistakes. The galaxy had only repeated them. Outside Terran influence, the fractures deepened. One by one, older powers tried to reassert dominance, assuming Earth's absence was an opportunity. The Xerax dynasty invaded 3 neutral systems, expecting little resistance. What they found were former Terran allies armed with defense grids laced with human failsafes, non-lethal, precise, and impossibly advanced. In less than 42 minutes, the entire Xerax fleet was immobilized, still alive but entirely humiliated. No response came from Earth. The message didn't need words. On the economic front, a new phenomenon emerged. The Terran standard credit, which had quietly become the most stable form of trade currency. Originally created to facilitate aid programs, it now dominated markets due to its incorruptibility. The algorithmic blockchain behind it couldn't be manipulated, and every attempt to counterfeit it had failed spectacularly. Those who adopted it saw instant trade benefit. Those who resisted became isolated. Within 18 months, every major trade hub had switched to TSC, voluntarily. No edict, no pressure, just result. Information networks followed. Terranet, once an auxiliary channel meant for aid communications, now covered 52% of galactic data flow. It was faster, more secure, and free of the propaganda algorithms that had infected other networks. People trusted it. That trust created an invisible empire, one of connectivity, not borders. The old council never saw it coming because it wasn't designed to conquer. It was designed to serve. And that made it unstoppable. In a desperate move, several mid-tier powers formed the Axis of Sovereignty, claiming they would resist Terran ideological control. They banned Terranet, outlawed TSC, and rejected all Terran-derived protocols. For a brief time, they celebrated their independence. Then came the collapse. First, their health networks failed. Terran medical software had been running diagnostics across half their systems, and without it, diseases resurged. Then supply chains fell apart. Ships that once relied on Terran logistical mapping now wandered into pirate ambushes. The last straw came when a solar anomaly struck the planet Goran, a flare event. Normally, Terran satellites would have detected it hours in advance and rerouted power grid. This time, there was no warning. The planet lost a quarter of its population in 12 minutes. 2 days later, a single unmanned Terran probe drifted past the ruins. It transmitted one message. This was preventable. The Axis of Sovereignty dissolved overnight. Former critics now became devotees. Leaders who once railed against Terran methods now begged for reintegration. But humanity didn't accept apologies. They accepted conduct. Several systems were granted conditional access, not by political negotiation, but after their populations met strict benchmarks. Educational transparency, ecological restoration, verified anti-corruption compliance. When they met those standards, a Terran liaison would arrive. Unarmed. Without ceremony. Ready to help. Not everyone was accepted. That was the final evolution. Earth no longer tried to save everyone. Only those who proved they wanted to be saved on Terran terms. Fairness, merit, resilience. No pity. No second chances. That made humanity terrifying. Not because they dominated, but because they no longer begged for peace. They built peace like a structure, one that required foundations. And if a civilization refused to supply those, Earth didn't tear them down. They just walked away. Again. And again. Until only those worth standing with were left. The most powerful story came not from war, but from a refugee fleet, the Cellari Arkship. Once wandering exiles from a collapsed empire, they had arrived near Terran space starving, broken, and afraid. No one trusted them. They carried old prejudices, hostile programming, damaged biospheres. But they asked for help. Not demanded, asked. And they offered transparency. Earth responded. Over the next year, the Terrans repaired their ships, treated their sick, and retrained their engineers. But they didn't stop there. They taught the Cellari their values. Open code. Mutual accountability. The right to question authority. The Cellari became not just rebuilt, but reborn. Within 5 years, they were helping others, replicating Terran infrastructure, offering aid to the same worlds that had once scorned them. And when the time came to name their capital station, they called it Honor. Not after a Terran, but after the principle they learned from them. The Council's final database entry came from a surviving observer named Joval. His report was not bitter, only resigned. We mistook human kindness for weakness. We mistook their patience for hesitation. We mistook their withdrawal for defeat. But they didn't walk away from us. They walked toward something better. And we chose to stay behind. He concluded with a warning. They won't come back. Not like before. Because they don't need to. They've already won. Not the war. The future. And then the Council's servers shut down. No successors. No heirs. Just silence. But the galaxy didn't stay quiet for long. New voices rose, systems built on Terran models, cultures shaped by mutual respect and brutal honesty. Not perfect, but better. Built by those who had learned, grown. Not all were human. Many weren't. But they shared a common belief. If you want peace, you build for it. If you want respect, you demonstrate it. And if you want to thrive, you don't wait for humans to save you. You prove you're worth saving. That was the legacy Earth left behind. Not in monuments or conquests, but in a question that echoed through every star system still recovering from its own arrogance. When the humans walked away, did you follow? Or did you just watch them go?